Loch Kelly, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you so much, David. It's so great to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you, and we're going to be discussing your very fascinating book, your latest book, The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, a
Yes.
revolutionary guide for living an awakened life. And I'm interested in you as I am in the book. So maybe we'll
Yeah.
spend a certain amount of time going back in time and learning a bit about your evolution. And
Sure.
one of the things that I was struck by is that early in the book, you mentioned that as a kid, you struggled with some form of dyslexia or
Mhm.
ADD.
Yes.
Are those still issues for you in your life, or did they completely go away?
I think there certainly have been addressed by this effortless mindfulness, which is in some ways kind of a creative solution that I slowly found through different um, modalities. But for instance, the first book I wrote took me 10 years to write, and the
Oh,
second book took about 9 months. So,
wow. So we
so
chalk that up to the practice of effortless mindfulness.
yes, I think so. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was, as a kid, it was a struggle because I understood things, but I couldn't get them out onto paper in the right order. Things would be in a different order, or so there was always this gap between knowing and expression.
Uh-huh. Okay. And, the title of the book, in a way, seems like it could possibly be misleading,
Uh-huh.
being Americans, and often to our detriment, we're interested in speed, in
Yeah,
fast and easy, right? So
that's right.
along comes a book called The Way of Effortless Meditation. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that might have been the first place, I don't remember, but my mind might have gone there early on,
Uh-huh.
only to discover as I got into the book that it's ancient. It's quite an
Yes, that's
old
right.
concept and old set
Yeah,
of techniques, and
that's right.
and not something just designed to capture the moment.
Yeah, so it's not instant enlightenment like instant coffee. It's, that the effortless,
Darn.
although the truth is that you do get immediate glimpses of your natural condition, which is an awake consciousness, which is hidden behind the mental chatter of our minds. So
Yeah.
there are glimpses, but the effortless actually isn't that you make no initial effort. It's that when you learn to shift in your awareness, you discover there's an awareness that's already effortlessly aware. So it's living from that, which has been talked about as a flow state or being in the zone. Um, so we know about it, but we often don't know how to access it directly.
Yeah, yeah. We've been told, of course, the perennial wisdom is that, hey, it's already there. You just need to
Yes,
notice it.
that's it. So that was the question because as these advanced practices and these wise gals and wise guys would say this, that the awakening you're seeking or the happiness or the interconnected love and joy is already inherent within us, then they would say, okay, and now sit for 30 years and maybe you'll find it. So there seemed to be a problem there with most of the gradual path methods. But I was fortunate enough to bump into a couple of teachers who had discovered a simple way not just to sit, but actually to shift
Yeah,
awareness.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that more.
Okay.
Going back to sort of your history, you were on a spiritual path, I think,
Mhm.
very early, and
Yeah.
for one thing, you mentioned that you had some kind of a spontaneous flow experience. Can you tell us
Hmm.
about that as a young person?
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, it's interesting. It's, because having this kind of ADD, dyslexia, the two things that often would take me into a feeling of being unified or being, connected and able to function were music and sports. So in sports, um, I was a natural athlete, so I was able to kind of get into the zone or the flow. And I had heard a sportscaster say about a quarterback on a team, he's got eyes in the back of his head.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought, well, I kind of know what that means, but it doesn't mean you can see behind you, but it's like a feeling. And I just intentionally started opening my awareness around. And when I did, I kind of opened this panoramic awareness, dropped into my body, and then felt the way I felt when I would be in the zone in sports. So I started to intentionally do that, and and it became a practice so that I wouldn't have to wait in sports to do that. I would be able to find a way to practice or access this.
That reminds me of various martial arts masters'
Yes,
stories
that's
about
right.
them being able to fight a group of attackers as if they had eyes in the back of their head.
Exactly. Yeah, you
Yeah,
start to feel like a cat. You know that you're totally in your body, and you trust the
yeah,
intelligence that's a greater intelligence, and it brings this sense of mastery on the level of physical, emotional, mental. So it's not a sense where some meditations kind of take you into a kind of a slow couch potato mode, but this is not passive. It's actually very alive.
yeah. Well, speaking of not passive, you actually sought out spiritual teachers and teaching, and you ended up, you started out studying psychology and spirituality. Where was that
Yes.
in college?
Yeah. So that was at Columbia University and Union Theological. They had a joint degree program.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I was fortunate enough to go on a fellowship uh, to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal.
Right.
And there I sat and did kind of traditional mindfulness meditation, which is in the Theravada insight meditation. And I did 5-day retreat, 10-day retreats, 21-day retreats, and really enjoyed and benefited from them. They were a struggle at first, but got into it all after practice, felt the effects of it. But then I went up north to Nepal and met this teacher who had been recommended, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. And
He was
within,
recommended by the Dalai Lama, right? If I
yes,
recall.
he was. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
went up to the Dalai Lama, who was just about to teach for the first time this direct path meditation in the Tibetan tradition called Dzogchen or Mahamudra. And he was all enthusiastic. I put my hand up and said, "Where should I go and who should I study with?" And he recommended this guy in Nepal. So off I went immediately, changed my plans, and uh, trekked up the Himalayas up to his little house. And about 8 of us were there. And he gave this short talk. And then within 3 minutes, had us shift our awareness. And I felt the same way I did at the end of a long retreat within 3 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
It's like a New Yorker cartoon going up to the Himalayas and,
that's right.
and meeting this very special spiritual teacher. And I'm struck by your it sounds like a very spontaneous and courageous thing to do, to raise your hand when the Dalai
Hmm.
Lama is about to speak and
Yeah.
ask something concrete and practical, like, okay, where can I get
Yeah.
this?
it's very it's
You're
very
that
American.
guy.
It's like, all right, I got the theory. Now how do I practice? Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
where do I go? You're talking about it, but I'm interested in experiencing it. So yeah,
yeah.
so
Good
I
for you.
put my hand up and off I went, and it ended up working out and becoming kind of my life's main interest.
Right, right. It was your whole career actually
Yeah,
uh, flowed from that decision.
that's right.
Yeah. Um, so, so it's been around a long time. Like,
Yes.
do we have any sense of how long?
I mean, this is the thing. It's really in the earliest wisdom traditions, from Taoism to shamanism to Hinduism, which was before Buddhism, to many of the wisdom traditions that that premise that you mentioned, that this natural condition is already free of that secondary suffering. And in some ways, it's almost the addition of our high functioning mental world that's brought us so many good things, but it's brought us a kind of identity that's the ego function becomes an ego identity. And then that self-referencing part of our brain takes over. So we think we have to think faster and refer to the past and project worst case scenarios into the future as quick as we can
Yeah.
in order to be safe, to be happy, and we become more goal oriented and more separate from our environment and separate from other people through just a habit of mind.
Yeah. Do you think that peculiar to Western tradition, do you think? Or,
I think there's the essential part of it is true with all people, but I think it's become exaggerated through contemporary or modern culture, whether East or West.
yeah, that
Uh,
makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah. So, how does effortless mindfulness, and this is a big question, you don't
yeah,
have to figure it all out at once, is,
sure.
how does that compare to uh, the popularity of, yeah, how does that compare to the mindfulness that's being taught so widely today?
Yeah. So interestingly, the teacher who I went to said, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, the Tibetan teacher, said there's two kinds of mindfulness: deliberate mindfulness and effortless mindfulness. So pretty much what is practiced as preliminary practices in that tradition is what we call mindfulness, which is deliberately sitting down, focusing on the breath, kind of narrowing our focus to concentrate, to calm the mind and soothe the body, and then to step back and watch our thoughts coming and going, thoughts, feelings, sensations, to realize there isn't a solid separate self there. But then the next stage is many people have not gotten to, which is to recognize where are you aware from once you're not aware from the small separate sense of self, which has been relaxed. So that's the focus of effortless mindfulness, is not just to deconstruct the current sense of self-referencing, but to discover this more spacious, pervasive, interconnected feeling of open-hearted love and connection, which has been called wisdom mind, or flow consciousness, that that many people know, but don't know that actually is the new normal rather than just a heightened state.
And so you've actually been teaching this uh, long before the current craze, if you will, of
Yeah,
mindfulness.
that's right.
Yeah. And so, what are your thoughts about the popularity of deliberate mindfulness as it's being taught these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. The research has been wonderful. It has really helped with many stress-related symptoms. It can calm and soothe the brain. So I think in itself, it's great, and yet in other ways, it's a kind of stepping stone, because effortless mindfulness goes to the root of suffering and gives you access to a more um, a loving, optimal mind that is kind of very distinct. When people do deliberate mindfulness and then come and learn effortless, they're just like, oh my God, I can't believe that was able to be accessed in minutes. It's what I know from the end of a 10-day retreat, and then I lose it within 2 days back at work.
Yeah. Yeah. So is a little bit paradoxical to me as I read your book,
Yeah.
because you also seem to be saying that um, deliberate mindfulness kind of can lay the groundwork
Hmm.
for effortless mindfulness, that there's a relationship between the two.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like, even though it's called effortless mindfulness,
Hmm.
uh, it's not like, oh, you can just quit then and don't have to worry about meditation or any kind of discipline. Yeah, I get the sense that there's still a lot of demand for discipline.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
talk to
different,
us about that
yeah.
relationship.
So I mean, it's interesting, the neuroscience. So I've been involved not only in the psychology and the wisdom traditions for meditation, but the neuroscience. And the neuroscience shows that when you do deliberate mindfulness, you actually take one part of your default mode network of your brain, which is the task mode network, and you put it on by keeping the concentration going, and you repress the internal observation. So the default mode network naturally just looks out what's going on out here, then it looks in what's going on in here. And in deliberate mindfulness, it puts task mode or external mode on, and that's why you feel calm. But you can't walk out the door or go off the cushion without having your internal world come back. And so then you lose the calm. And this effortless mindfulness balances internal and external networks. So you're literally aware of what's going on inside and what's going on outside simultaneously. And it just takes, so it's a different muscle. It's almost like deliberate mindfulness. You're doing push-ups with this attentional external ability, but
Uh,
then you have to walk up a mountain. You need your legs. So there's this new balanced shifting of awareness to this more open rather than closed field of awareness. And you can do it through small glimpses many times during the day rather than long sitting periods with eyes closed.
yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. And I was very interested by the reference that you just made now and in the book to the default mode network, because
Yes.
that's something I've been uh, hearing about, learning about through these interviews. And and I've also gotten re-interested in psychedelics and the
Hmm.
whole, that seems to be enjoying a renaissance
Yes, that's right.
of research and people taking it in a serious and intentional kind of stance towards it, rather than a recreational stance.
Yes.
And and so the default network certainly has been mentioned in that context
Yeah.
as some kind of a doorway or important aspect of the psychedelic opening.
Yes. Yes. I mean, so interestingly, the brain networks that balance in this advanced form of effortless mindfulness are similar to psilocybin microdosing.
Hmm.
So, in other words, sometimes I say you can microdose or you can do micro meditations to get
Yeah,
to the same place. So it really is a natural way without the negative side effects that, 1/3 of all people who do psychedelics have a bad trip, according to the research at Johns Hopkins.
uh-huh.
And that's even a group that's been pre-screened.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that statistic.
Yes, yeah, and that's pre-screened people who are
Yeah,
pre-screened from having psychiatric history or anything like that.
yeah.
So, um, so certainly there are some benefits for PTSD with psychedelics and some other treatments. But I think what people are getting at is what I feel effortless mindfulness offers in a way that it takes the same amount of time to learn as it takes to learn deliberate mindfulness, which many people have learned. And you get an effect similar to the microdosing in that you feel more open and interconnected. There's a feeling of there's something greater than yourself, whatever you call that. You feel a sense of love or all is well, feeling like safety, a certain kind of okayness, well-being uh, that doesn't come with deliberate mindfulness as much as a calm. The EEG study shows that that in deliberate mindfulness, you go from beta to alpha. So you go from fast moving mind to calm. And in the effortless mindfulness, you get the calm, but then you get uh, synchronized gamma. So what that is aha moments or creativity or
Yeah.
joy bursts of, which is similar again to some of the more psychedelic or higher creativity dimensions of consciousness. So it's a different practice. It's really kind of exciting to offer it now to people during this time when people, I think, are looking for that experience that psychedelics gives. But this one is intentional and non addictive and non side, the side effects are not there.
Right. Right. I'm interested in this whole dimension of technologically assisted
Hmm.
mind states, I guess.
Yeah.
And so not only do we have psychedelics, but we also have things like neurofeedback
Yep.
and transcranial magnetic stimulation, and
Yes.
the various products that are coming on the market, and also the meditation apps like
Yeah.
Calm and
Yeah.
Headspace, I think.
Hmm.
Um, what's your do you have reactions or thoughts
Yeah,
or
I mean, I
judgments
think
about those?
everyone is with good intentions. I think mostly good intentions, trying to help and is looking at this area of are we limited to this kind of neurotic, anxious, or depressed consciousness that most people end up in, including young people who aren't even yet have a life history of strong stress. They're just you know so um, these apps, most of the apps are using deliberate mindfulness, and again, I think it's a good stepping stone and it's a calming, but it does calm the small sense of self, and then you have to still go back to being anxious and then calm and anxious and calm, whereas some of these other methods like effortless mindfulness are trying to upgrade your identity, upgrade your mind, so that you literally are in this background, non-reactive acceptance, loving presence. So that there's a study that shows that advanced Tibetan practitioners and college students, so they would have their baseline of emotional reactivity would be lower for the Tibetans and higher for the college students, and then they have earphones on and they hear a baby screaming in pain. And so the college students would go up and then they would have a long time coming back down. It would start being reactive and keep associating. The Tibetans, would you guess that they would go less high or more high? They actually go more high.
I could see an argument for either one of those.
Yeah, so they go higher.
Uh,
They emotionally feel more, and then they come right back down to baseline.
yeah,
So the difference is the non-reactivity, not the deadness. So there's a more open emotional ability to be alive and to be connected and to be fully human without being repressed or depressed or anxious. And this is the amazing possibility, to live a fully intimate human life, not to
yeah.
you know either use meditation to spiritually bypass or use meditation to kind of comfortably numb yourself.
Yeah, that one of the things I reflected on is that uh, you're a man in the world.
Hmm.
Uh, I know you're married. I don't know if you have
Yes.
kids. Do you have kids?
No, we don't. We decided not to have kids, but
Okay. So
yeah,
you,
marriage for 26 years and live in New York City. So there you go, right,
okay, and,
right there. That'll do it.
yeah, and you, in a way, you're running a business. I mean,
Yeah,
you do workshops all over the place, and you
that's
write a
right.
book, more than one
Mhm.
book, and you know, so so clearly you're not sitting in a cave in Tibet with all
That's right.
the the perhaps wonderful isolation that
That's right.
involves.
Yeah,
But you're in the situation where, yeah, your monastery has to be within.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been a guinea pig in the the fMRI studies with a lot of my colleagues. And, that's the thing, is that literally it changes your brain completely to do these practices. And they're not that hard to do. It's small glimpses, 1 minute to 6 minute practices a few times a day. So as you say, it does take consistency. So
Hmm.
not super effort like meditate 8 hours a day for your whole life or long periods, but each day just little, but it becomes almost a joyful motivation. You're like, oh good, I can now look above my computer, open up my awareness, be aware of the spacious awareness, now be aware from the spacious awareness back to this more embodied, open-hearted presence that's not looking to thought to orient,
Yeah.
but is in this flow, and then go back to typing or relating or creating whatever you're doing from this new, already installed operating system, which is completely different than the first mental, hypervigilant, smart, fast operating system, which we build up through even highly psychological, successful people are still operating from this mental habit.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have this complex brain, and we
Hmm.
have. I like your metaphor of operating systems,
Yeah.
and so we have this sort of profound operating system that's mostly running in the background, and
Yeah.
it's not the one that we've really developed our muscles around. We've developed our muscles around the more focused, outward directed
Hmm.
achievement operating system, survival operating system.
Yeah. That's right.
Because
Yeah.
we come, to a large extent, we come out of fear, right? So,
Yes. Yeah. So there's
so
that primitive,
yeah,
that they call it the negativity bias of the
yeah,
brain,
right.
uh, which makes us scan for danger, um, and that physical dominates the mental, dominates the emotional, dominates the spiritual dimension, because we haven't learned to upgrade what can allow that to run. So all the programs can run, the programs of uh, survival brain, and they'll calm, but they're like a Tai Chi master. You'll be safer in the world. You're still able to respond physically
Yeah,
if there's danger. That's the thing. It's not that you have to be hyper vigilant the way that system seems to say.
yeah,
You can be responsive and safer.
yeah, yeah. You can you can learn to be in the moment
Yeah,
and trust that, hey, if I need to respond to something, you know, I'll face that when I come to it, but I don't need to
that's right.
live in constant anticipation and fear
Yes.
of that possibility.
Yeah, and that's the training of the, as I both do this as meditation system, but as psychotherapy too, training people, having worked with people with complex trauma, that, the story is in the meditation field, oh, this is only for advanced meditators. Not everyone can learn it. You really have to go through all the hoops, and yet there's a whole other tradition that says no, that's not true. You can just check it out. If it works for you, you don't have to go through all the ritual training. And in fact, most Westerners have done their maturing, their ability to focus in school, their conditioned ethical development that is part of that training, so we can kind of upgrade right away, which is the good news. But in terms of treating people with complex trauma, not only can they access this, they need to access it. And when they do access it, they get healing from this more spacious, pervasive, open-hearted sense of self that can be aware of the trauma, that can be aware of the shame-based parts of them and the protectors that come up, and then they can unburden those parts of themselves more effectively than working from a small
Yeah.
ego center that is smaller than the trauma.
Has anybody done any research? I understand you're doing clinical work
Yes.
on this. Has there been any research on effortless mindfulness, if you will, and PTSD?
Yes. So one guy who's doing it is Richard Miller, who does, he has a system called iRest. So it's kind of a system. He works with the VA hospital and done some research. And then the other group I work with is Internal Family Systems with Richard Schwartz. He and I have co-taught.
Okay.
And there's research on healing um, certain populations of trauma using this method, which in that system is called the self with a capital S. So that you have many parts of yourself, the ego self, the trauma self, the the negativity bias part of your survival self, and then you become aware from your greater self that you have all these parts, and then you can be with them and unburden them from this upgraded consciousness.
Yeah, from some of the interviews I've done on PTSD,
Yeah.
the lamentations is that the problem is so large that
Mm.
we don't have approaches that can be scaled up.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, is this something that you could envision doing in a large group?
Yeah. I absolutely. I mean, I do it in a large group with people with mixed, kind of create a safe environment, and then do a basic introduction, and then kind of pair people up to do a little deeper work, and then um, so it could definitely be done in that way, and individually it certainly has clear benefits.
Yeah, yeah, wow. I think I had a little glimpse of this before. Speaking of glimpse, we'll talk about glimpses more.
Yeah.
But somebody else that I interviewed, uh, sort of about a totally different topic,
Hmm.
uh, and sort of dropped. Sometime we should talk about instant awakening or
Huh.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you're familiar with Dr. Dan Brown, who's at
Sure.
Harvard. And
Yes, absolutely.
you are, yeah, okay, because I have a whole little narrative thing about him here, but you've had a contact with him. You guys
Yes.
know each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're very similar. We work with very similar system.
Yes, I was feeling that as I was looking
Yeah.
at your book, and even though he only gave me a little glimpse, but
Hmm.
again, the word glimpse keeps coming up. Tell us about a little bit more about glimpses.
Yeah.
I think I got a bit of an understand. By the way, you've got lots of. We should let people know you've got lots of exercises in the
Yes.
book, things that
Yeah.
people can do, and um, and I don't know if I got this right, but I sort of tried to dip into that a little bit myself, and
Yeah.
for me, it's like to re-access ex- past experiences
Hmm.
where I felt just kind of at one
Hmm.
world. And for me, a lot of that is skiing. Uh,
Yes,
and
that's right.
I was never any better than an intermediate skier, but
Yeah.
still the experience of flowing with the
Mhm.
mountain rather than resisting it,
Yes.
being with friends and vacation and all of that, it just has this wonderful positive aura.
Hmm. Yes.
And if I recall that in memory, then I can begin to feel some of
Hmm.
that experience again. But I don't
Yeah.
often do that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of the exercises is called the memory door. So
Okay.
the idea would be to ask people, first of all, to assume that we've all had these glimpses, but we didn't know that this is what it was, or we thought it was only related to a certain place or time or people or experience. But using that as a doorway, feel that sense of skiing, feel that sense of oneness, feel that sense of joy, and then let go of the memory, let go of the visual, and see whether it's here now. See whether that's not only the state, but the dimension of who you are, who's aware, where you're aware from, whether that is still here. And that's what a glimpse is. A glimpse isn't a meditation state. It actually isn't an altered state. It actually is considered your actual baseline shift into a new operating system, rather than as if you are an ego and you can have meditation states. It's saying, no, the ego centeredness is actually the altered state, that's actually the hypnotic state.
Mm-hmm.
So you're dehypnotizing from the trance of ego centeredness back into your natural condition if you weren't creating this habit of ego identity, and you're in a more loving self flow like you are in these other times when you are doing something very highly technical and functional, like skiing, that's even potentially dangerous, but somehow your trust and physical and mental, emotional doer relaxes, and there you are, home in this true sense of self, which is why it's called true nature or self, rather than, so you're getting a glimpse of who you truly are, rather than thinking, this is who I am, I'm this anxious person, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to calm myself, and then I'll come back. So glimpse is a whole nother approach to letting the cloud of your mind stepping out above, to the side, below, deeper, wider, higher, and then from the sky, realizing, oh, I'm the sky as well as the cloud, and then realizing, and I'm also the cloud, so that you're not, spacing out, but you're stepping into the subtler dimension of consciousness, and then including the more faster moving dimensions from a more vast and welcoming dimension of who you've always been.
There are two personal experiences I'd like to share with you that
Sure.
I think maybe relate to what you're saying. And one of them has quickly fled away.
Okay.
The other one, I'm wondering, what was that? The other one has been very profound for me.
Okay.
Is we had twins, kind of unexpectedly. We had twins. We thought we were done having children, and we already had two, and then we had twins, and so I'm in the rocking chair, but I was totally freaked out when I learned that we were going to have twins. I went directly into fear and disaster and poverty imaginations and so on. And but go forward a little bit, and I'm in the rocking chair, and I've got the two little guys, one on each shoulder, each I want to say breast. There was no suckling going on, but this, and it was like their little consciousnesses were pulling on mine.
Wow.
And I began to feel this sort of state, of an altered state of consciousness that just felt very, very natural and wonderful. So sometime later, that turned into, I knew I wanted to experience that state again. And so laying in bed at night, I would go back to that feeling. I would target the feeling.
Yeah.
And it was a feeling of joy. And I imagined that I had a volume control that I could turn up the volume and intensify that feeling. And I could intensify that feeling until I'd get to a level where I'd sort of drop back. I couldn't sustain it any longer.
Yeah.
But I felt like I had discovered some kind of powerful meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's exactly that's what I call the memory door, is
Mhm.
using that as a door to access what seems like an effect like joy, but actually is the natural condition, that kind of joy, or what they call bliss.
Yeah,
Uh, in Tibetan Buddhism, they call it emptiness bliss, is the natural conditions, because when you let go of the struggle, you feel this safety and this well-being and this interconnectedness, and then, kind of a freedom, relief, joy, bliss that is a background bliss, that then you can feel fear or worry or something can come and go, or disappointment or grief can come and go, but it's coming to you, the joyful, non-worried, non-shame-based being.
yeah, yeah. And I remember now what the other experience I
Okay.
wanted to tell you about
All right.
was I I did experiment with psychedelics when I
Okay.
was in graduate school, and my first LSD experience. We hope it was
Hmm.
LSD. We think it was
Okay.
LSD, but you
Yeah.
don't know for sure. Was when that began to come on, when it came on really strongly, I had this feeling of recognition.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I know this place.
Hmm.
I remember this place. And the way that I interpreted it for myself was that it was some kind of childhood consciousness,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that I was back in the child brain, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe child, maybe like the memory of a subtle dimension. Yeah. So we don't even, but the idea is that that's the experience, that it's already natural, that there's some remembering rather than creating it. You're returning to it. So
Mhm.
whatever that feels like, that's what it feels like for most people. Oh, I'm home. Oh, I know this. Oh, this is me.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
this is the, what I've, felt essentially always, in whether it was a time or just behind it all.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we can access. So the curious thing is that though it's called effortless, it literally is the ability to intentionally access within moments. So you learn how to shift your awareness. So
Mhm.
one of the ways to do is a memory, and the other way is like to let go of the doer and just feel it. And then the third way is shifting, literally moving awareness, dropping it down, opening it up to return to this more spacious, pervasive, subtle dimension, and stepping out of the cloud or the pattern of thought, going to thought, and feeling like there's a mini me inside my head looking out of my eyes, that people have said, I think, therefore I am. And then you realize, oh, that's just a thought, that's a feeling, but I'm not aware from orienting by thought. I'm aware from this flow, from this spacious awareness based knowing that's embodied and can use your hand and can use thought, but doesn't have to create a thinker in order to be. And in fact, that thinker that's trying to be calm and happy is actually the obstacle to being calm and happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you rapidly let go of the doer? As you said, you can just
Yeah.
drop into letting go of the doer. That
Yes. So,
sounds good, but I
yeah.
don't know how to do that.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways, and we can even do it. So that, that's first, is the premise is almost to feel that the premise is this ego function has become an ego identity, and it basically is a habit of thought going to thought. And you can feel like, if you're listening to me, anybody who's listening, just feel like, where are you listening from? Where are you looking from? Where are you located? And most people will feel like, oh, well, I'm looking out of here, I'm hearing from here. And then you just realize that doer, which is functional, is trying to solve the problem of identity, of how to be happy. And if it could just relax, that there might be this natural flow that shows up. So a simple inquiry would be, on the level of identity, what's here now when there's no problem to solve? So if you just understand it with your mind and then let
Yeah.
your awareness, where are you aware from when there's no problem to solve?
I'll probably have to sit with that.
Yeah,
I've sort of, uh, you know, there are all these exercises in your book, and I'd be
yes,
happy to be a guinea pig here, but
okay.
evidently I can't do it
Yeah,
quite that rapidly. But
yeah. And
so,
so that's kind of a simple inquiry that
mhm,
people, if I have a group of people just walked off the street, half the people in the room will immediately start saying, what's here? Joy, love, connection, peace, freedom, love. So you just shows that within a moment, those natural qualities, that feeling, where are you aware from? Well, I'm not aware from here. I'm aware from everywhere and nowhere and here.
mhm.
So this um, this dropping of that, and then the other way that we play with it is actually feeling like awareness can step out and drop from head to heart,
Mhm.
or open to a subtler, more spacious dimension. So those exercises, in the book can lead you through. And then I have some audios. I have some free YouTube videos, but also from my first book, I have a whole, 31 little practices, 1 to 6 minutes, um, called Shift into Freedom, a training in the science and practice of open-hearted awareness. And people put that on their phone, and you can do it with eyes open, on a break, walking, sitting on a subway in New York City, and literally learn to shift from operating system 1 to operating system 2. And
Where can
that's,
people find
yeah,
these audios?
yeah. So going to my website, everything is there, lochkelly.org, LOCHKELLY.org. And then you'll see my books are there, and there's a book page that gives some um, free audios and videos. And then you'll see some events. I'm going to be up at, I'm going to be teaching in Costa Rica and Kripalu and in at Esalen in California. But so to teach people in a group to go through this. But there's all these resources um, of book and audio and online courses, and it's becoming quite amazing to hear from people all around the world who've
Oh,
never met me,
yeah.
who have just picked up a book and listened to these audios, just saying like, "Oh my God, I've known this. I just didn't know how to get there, and now
Wow.
I can intentionally return home and live from here." Because
Yeah.
it's not a state that's passive. When you shift into it, you can go immediately into relating to another person, or going back to work, typing, walking, creating.
I'm going to check those resources out. And of course,
Yes.
I've already got the book. By the way, we haven't shown people the book.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube,
Yeah.
this is what the book looks like. It's it's even with the index and everything, it's just under 200 pages. So
Yeah.
it's not a tome
Yes.
to,
Yes.
to struggle through. And a lot of it is is step by step kind of exercises. How do you envision people using the book?
Yeah. I think the first part is kind of being introduced to this different approach. Like, oh, it's not just concentrating, it's actually opening. Oh, it's already effortless. Oh, I already done it. Oh, that's true. I already know that I know this. I just didn't know how to get there. And then seeing a little map and some tools about how to get there. And then probably to read some of the exercises. But one of the suggestions is either to listen to me on one of my audios, lead people through it. But the other suggestion is to read in your own voice the practices
Mm.
at your own pace into
Yeah.
your own phone, and then listen to it in your own voice back, leading you through the exercises. So that people have found that really to be a helpful way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great.
Um,
It's feeling to me like we might be getting somewhere near the
Okay,
winding down place. Is
sure.
there anything else you'd like to get in before we do that?
No, this has been great. I think, just to invite people to try this out, to say that my feeling is awakening is kind of the next natural stage of human development, that it's much more accessible, learnable, teachable than has ever been considered before. And with modern neuroscience and psychology as supports, and kind of going through in a way to learn how to teach to different learning styles.
Mhm.
It's now more available to people, and I'm hoping people will give it a try and see what your experience is for yourself.
Well, it's all very inviting.
Yes.
So, Loch Kelly, it's been delightful to meet you, and
Yes.
so I want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Rap Radio.
Thank you, David. Really nice to talk to you and meet you.